afternoon, Friday, June 20th. I'm Yumna Naufal. These are today's headlines. A bombing rocks the Dahr al-Baydar crossing in the eastern Bekaa region in Lebanon. The unit at the SIS Intelligence Office Bureau raids the Napoleon Hotel in Hamra and arrests terrorist suspects. And the United Nations Refugee Agency says at the end of last year, now more than 50 million people have been forced from their homes. This is the highest figure of displaced people since World War II. A bombing rocked the Dahr al-Baydar crossing in the eastern Bekaa region. Voice of Lebanon radio reported that a suicide bomber blew himself up in a vehicle near an internal security forces checkpoint. The National News Agency reported that 2 people were killed in the blast and a number of others wounded, while the LBC television said that one of the casualties was a member of the internal security forces. Head of the Red Cross, Georges Katane, confirmed that a member of the ISF was killed and 34 wounded in the incident. And he urged citizens against heading to the area, confirming that the attack targeted the ISF checkpoint and 6 of the wounded are members of the ISF, according to the Interior Ministry. Initial reports said that security forces were chasing a booby-trapped vehicle before the bombing took place. In a separate incident, a unit in the Internal Security Forces Intelligence Bureau raided the hotel at Magdasi Street called Napoleon. This is in Beirut's Hamra neighborhood in search of wanted suspects. According to the state-run National News Agency, the operation was carried out in light of information obtained by the Intelligence Bureau on the presence of a suspect at the hotel. Media reports said the raid targeted Napoleon, and MTV reported the unit apprehended a terror group inside the hotel. LBC said that the operation was carried out by the ISF's Intelligence Bureau and the General Security. It estimated that there are about 7 to 20 suspects being targeted in the raid. The operation comes in light of security reports obtained by security agencies on possible terrorist acts on Lebanese territories. The United Nations Refugee Agency says that at the end of last year, more than 50 million people had been forced from their homes worldwide, and this figure keeps going up. This is the highest figure of displaced people since World War II. In its annual Global Trends report released this morning, UNHCR said that out of the 51.2 million people displaced, half of them are children, many of whom are caught up in conflicts or persecutions that the agency said world powers are unable to prevent or end. The overall figure in the new report surged by 6 million from their tally at the end of 2012. It includes 16.7 million refugees and 33.3 million displaced within their homelands. 1.2 million of them are asylum seekers whose applications are pending. According to the UNHCR, Syrians fleeing the escalating conflict accounted for most of the world's 2.5 million new refugees last year. Iraqi forces are massing north of Baghdad, aiming to strike back at the Sunni rebels who have taken control of large parts of the country. The governor of Saladin province, Abdullah al-Jibouri, said 50,000 soldiers are now stationed around Samarra, intending to regain territory lost to rebel groups led by the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, known as ISIL, which is 100 kilometers north of Baghdad and has become the front line in the battle with Sunni fighters allied to them. Coming up next from the Lebanese Australia Chamber, Mr. Michael Rizzi joins us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. In our studios, we have the pleasure to welcome in our studios again, Mr. Michael Rizzi, the head of trade relations between Australia and Lebanon from the Australian Lebanese Chamber of Commerce. He just attended the conference organized by the Foreign Affairs Ministry, where he gave a presentation to highlight how to attract foreign trade and investments. Michael, thank you for being with us today. We're talking about attracting foreign trade and investments at a time where the news is bleak. So give me some positive news.
You may recall, Yumna, last time I met with you a few months ago, we spoke about the export of fresh Lebanese produce to Australia.
Right.
This has gone one step further. Before my visit to Beirut, we had a very good meeting at the Ministry of Agriculture in Canberra, in the presence of the chargé d'affaires, the Lebanese chargé d'affaires in Canberra, Mr. Milad Rad, and some very positive developments have taken place with the ministry. Mr. Rad has sent a letter to the Minister of Agriculture in Lebanon through the Foreign Ministry. That letter now is with the Minister of Agriculture, and hopefully he will act on it so we can move another major step forward towards executing this very interesting project, which would serve our farmers and our exporters to export fresh produce from Lebanon to Australia.
Right. You know, Australia, we talked about this last time, and I know you said that, you know, it was specifically our cherries, and I think it was apples and fresh produce exported from Lebanon to Australia. But when we talk about attracting foreign trade and investments to Lebanon, specifically from Australia, we know there's a significant Lebanese population in Australia. How are you able to do that in light of everything that's happening right now?
Look, I think, once again, that's something I touched on during the last interview. Lebanon has been experiencing a lot of difficulties for the last 30 years or so. But regardless, the Lebanese have continued to build, have continued to work on the positive aspects, and also trying to address the negative aspects. But definitely, it's been non-stop towards doing something constructive for Lebanon, and that's a good sign. I believe in that. We should not be, we should not be frightened to go and continue to do what we are doing, and at the same time, see what we can do to address all the issues that need to be addressed in Lebanon. And I think we all know what these issues are. And of course, the security issue is a major one, and it's unfortunate that something had happened today. And but Lebanon has been suffering, but the will of the Lebanese people to continue, I think that will not be, that will not be hampered in any way. The Lebanese will continue to work for a better Lebanon, and I think the people in diaspora as well are major supporters in that regard.
You said that during this visit, a memorandum of understanding will be signed, or I don't know if it was signed, by a visiting Australian delegation to set up an Australian Institute of Training, allowing and opening new opportunities for the youth. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yes, well, the last trip, Mr. Warren Jack, who is the CEO of the Australian Institute of Training, and also Mr. Ray Mortlock. They were supposed to be with us last year, but they delayed it because of the circumstances prevailing in September and October of last year. Now that they are here in Lebanon, we had some very good talks with the Lebanese side, and I can happily advise you that an MOU would be in place before they leave Lebanon, before they leave Beirut very shortly. How will it open new opportunities for the... This will be ironed out between the Lebanese and the Australian side, how this is going to work. We are talking to academics in Beirut who knows quite well what is suitable for Lebanon, and the Australian side will tailor-make something suitable for our market here. All
right. When Australia has been labeled one of the happiest countries in the world, I think in sharp contrast to Lebanon, which is going through a turmoil right now, with Syria on the one hand, Israel on one hand, Iraq not being too far. The whole Middle East is going through an upheaval. When you talk to people in Australia and you tell them, all right, this is where I come from, this is Lebanon, what general vision do they have? How do you set records straight to try to basically attract people to come to this country?
Look, we've always been very honest and open that, not only Lebanon, the whole region is going through some difficulties. But we don't sort of just hammer away on the negatives and forget the positive aspects. I can honestly tell you that the Australian two delegates that are here in Beirut at the moment, they saw a lot of positive aspects. So when people from other countries come and visit us, they can see the will to do things, and they can see the resilience of the Lebanese people, and that's a good sign. And we will definitely not stop promoting Lebanon as such, not only for the Lebanese market, but for the market in the whole region. And that's where our business community play a very major role. And the Australians do see that. And it's a good opportunity for them.
Well, thank you for being with us today, Mr. Michael Adizit. Please come back. Whenever you return from Australia, you have to come back and visit us. And on that note, that was the Lebanese Australian Chamber Head of Trade Relations, Mr. Michael Adizit, talking to us a bit about the situation here and Australian-Lebanese relations. And on that note, I will remind you of our headlines today. A bombing rocks the Dahr al-Baydar crossing in the eastern Bekaa region of the country. A unit in the Internal Security Forces Intelligence Bureau raids the Napoleon Hotel in Hamra, arrests what it calls terrorist suspects. And the UN Refugee Agency says at least 50 million people have been forced out of their homes worldwide. This is the highest figure of displaced people since World War II. Thank you for tuning in to Future TV. We'll be back tomorrow for more analysis on what's happening in the country. I'm Yumna Nofer from Beirut, wishing you all a safe weekend.
احنا بدنا سلسلة نمشي بالشارع والناس ما تطلع فينا وتسب علينا.